In 2025, U.S. immigration policy has once again taken center stage in geopolitical debates, with growing restrictions targeting several Asian nations. A combination of national security concerns, diplomatic rifts, and shifting domestic attitudes toward immigration has prompted Washington to enforce or consider bans on various countries across Asia. These moves have been met with both domestic political support and international backlash. As global migration patterns evolve and U.S. foreign policy takes a more assertive posture in Asia, 5 nations in particular have found themselves on the front lines of a new era of American border politics. Welcome to Discover Abroad, your ultimate gateway to the world. From global travel shifts and economic upheavals to the powerful impact of politics on everyday lives, we break down the stories shaping our planet. So before we start, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates. 1. Afghanistan. Afghanistan tops the list of Asian nations facing the most severe immigration restrictions from the United States in 2025. The fallout from the 2021 U.S. withdrawal continues to reverberate through both diplomatic and humanitarian channels. Although tens of thousands of Afghan refugees were initially resettled in the U.S. under humanitarian parole, by 2023 the political climate had shifted. By 2025, the Biden administration, under immense bipartisan pressure, was forced to tighten entry regulations following reports of failed vetting procedures and growing conservative pressure over border security. The new restrictions have effectively frozen further Afghan immigration, with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security announcing that no additional humanitarian visas would be granted until integrity and national security reviews were complete. Critics argue that this is a veiled political maneuver designed to appease right-wing factions ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. For many Afghans trapped in limbo, particularly women and children fleeing Taliban rule, the ban has cut off one of the few viable escape routes. Human rights organizations have lambasted the policy, noting that it contradicts America's moral obligations after 2 decades of military presence in the country. With Pakistan and Iran already overwhelmed with Afghan refugees, the ripple effects are now global. But the U.S. remains firm. Afghan immigration is, for now, effectively halted. 2. Myanmar, Burma. Myanmar has been spiraling into chaos since the 2021 military coup, and its deteriorating human rights record has put it firmly in the crosshairs of U.S. immigration authorities. In 2025, the United States introduced targeted visa restrictions on individuals affiliated with the military junta, including business elites, government officials, and members of their families. But what began as a selective sanctioning policy has evolved into a broader immigration freeze that now affects nearly all forms of migration from Myanmar. Concerns over transnational crime, illegal trafficking, and a growing number of asylum applications have prompted the U.S. to act more aggressively. The American Embassy in Yangon suspended regular visa operations in early 2024, and by mid-2000, even refugee processing programs through the United Nations were delayed or denied under a new security review protocol. The policy shift is widely viewed as part of Washington's strategy to isolate the military regime, but the fallout has disproportionately impacted ordinary Burmese citizens, many of whom are seeking safety and stability amid civil war and economic collapse. As conflict between ethnic armed groups in the military intensifies, tens of thousands of internally displaced persons have sought refuge in neighboring Thailand and India. The United States, which had once accepted thousands of Burmese refugees under earlier humanitarian programs, has now become virtually inaccessible to those fleeing persecution. The change reflects a broader hardening of U.S. asylum policy under political pressure to reduce the number of incoming migrants and prioritize domestic security interests over international humanitarian obligations. Issue 3. Iran. The immigration ban on Iran is one of the most politically charged restrictions in 2025, shaped by years of strained relations between Tehran and Washington. While the Trump-era travel ban on predominantly Muslim countries was repealed in early 2021, tensions with Iran continued to escalate due to nuclear program violations, regional proxy conflicts, and cyber espionage allegations. The re-imposition of targeted travel bans on Iranian nationals in 2020 marks a return to policies once condemned as discriminatory, but now rebranded under the pretext of national security. The U.S. State Department now blocks most visa categories for Iranian citizens, including student visas, work permits, and family reunification applications. Iranian Americans have decried the move as a direct attack on families and cultural ties. Universities across the U.S., which previously hosted thousands of Iranian scholars and researchers, have reported a dramatic decline in applications and acceptance rates from Iranian students. Tech firms and medical institutions reliant on skilled Iranian professionals are also feeling the pinch. This immigration crackdown is closely tied to intelligence assessments, alleging that Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps is using international migration routes to plant operatives abroad. Whether or not the claims hold merit, they have been enough to justify sweeping visa denials. Meanwhile, Washington continues to engage Tehran through diplomatic back channels, but the immigration pipeline remains largely closed. In many ways, this ban represents the collision between two policy tracks, one seeking strategic containment and another driven by domestic populist sentiment. Iranian families continue to bear the brunt of that collision, often stranded in third countries while awaiting decisions that never arrive. 4. Bangladesh's presence on the 2025 immigration restriction list has come as a surprise to many. Long considered a reliable U.S. partner in South Asia, the country's recent trajectory has alarmed American policymakers. The primary concerns stem from political instability, religious extremism, and the growing presence of radicalized groups in rural areas. Although Bangladesh has made significant economic strides, its internal security apparatus has been overwhelmed by rising violence between secular and Islamist factions. The United States now sees this instability as a growing threat that could spill over through immigration channels. In late 2024, a U.S. congressional report listed Bangladesh among a group of countries with elevated risk of security-based visa fraud and recommended enhanced scrutiny of all applicants. By early 2025, the U.S. Department of State announced a pause on new visa processing for Bangladeshi nationals, including those applying for diversity visas, work-based categories, and student entry. The decision sparked outrage within the Bangladeshi American community, which has been one of the fastest-growing diaspora populations in the past decade. What makes the case of Bangladesh particularly contentious is the lack of a formal ban. Instead, U.S. officials have instituted what critics call a silent suspension, wherein applications are neither accepted nor outright denied. They are simply delayed indefinitely. This bureaucratic limbo has left thousands of families separated and hundreds of students unable to attend their programs in the U.S., even after receiving admissions and scholarships. The murky nature of the restrictions has led to accusations of discrimination and racial profiling, though the U.S. government insists the pause is strictly temporary and based on evolving security metrics. 5. Pakistan. Pakistan's inclusion on the list is a reflection of long-standing complexities in U.S.-Pakistan relations, which have grown increasingly strained in the face of global security realignments. Despite a brief thaw during early 2020's cooperation on regional counterterrorism, recent years have seen growing American frustration with Islamabad's dual policies regarding extremist groups and its uneasy alliance with China. In 2025, the U.S. government formally imposed layered visa restrictions targeting specific Pakistani demographics, especially young males from politically sensitive regions such as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. Although there is no blanket ban on Pakistani immigration, visa issuance has declined by more than 60% compared to 2022. The U.S. Embassy in Islamabad and the consulate in Karachi have reduced their interview slots and increased documentation requirements to what applicants describe as nearly unachievable levels. Many U.S.-bound students from Pakistan now find themselves forced to defer or abandon their academic plans altogether, while family-based green card petitions face years-long delays due to additional background checks. Washington's policy is shaped by concerns that militant networks operating in Pakistan's border regions could exploit immigration loopholes. This narrative has been reinforced by a series of isolated arrests in Europe and North America of suspects with travel histories linked to Pakistan. However, civil society groups argue that the overwhelming majority of Pakistani migrants pose no threat and that such policies feed into Islamophobic narratives. The situation is further complicated by Pakistan's growing alignment with China through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which U.S. strategists view as a threat to American influence in the region. Consequently, immigration policy is now being used as a diplomatic lever. While Islamabad continues to request a revision of the restrictions, American officials remain non-committal, citing national interest as the guiding principle. For the Pakistani public, particularly youth seeking education and opportunity abroad, the message is clear. The U.S. is no longer an open door. Conclusion: the United States immigration bans and restrictions on these 5 Asian nations in 2025 reflect a broader shift in both its foreign policy posture and domestic political climate. National security is now the dominant frame through which immigration is judged, often at the expense of humanitarian and diplomatic considerations. For countries like Afghanistan and Myanmar, the bans underscore the collapse of civil society in the limits of American interventionism. For nations like Iran and Pakistan, the restrictions signal a deeper entrenchment of geopolitical rivalry. And in Bangladesh's case, it illustrates how even allies can be caught in the crosshairs of evolving U.S. strategy. As the global order continues to fragment, the United States appears increasingly willing to weaponize immigration policy as a tool of leverage and control. While proponents argue that such measures are necessary for safety and sovereignty, critics warn of a growing isolationism that could erode America's moral authority and global partnerships. In 2025, the human cost of these bans is unmistakable. Families divided, futures stalled, and lives disrupted in pursuit of a security that may never be fully realized.